Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So here we meet over a cup of tea. Cheers, Vijay sir.
Cheers. Thank you, Jagdish. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on LinkedIn Live. So I just want to share a quick, I would say, the purpose of this ClarITea Chat with our audience. So let me share my screen.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is a discussion over a cup of tea with IT leaders, and as I had mentioned in my opening note that was last week about the complexity in the industry, and 83% of IT programs fail to deliver the intended ROI, and we had touched upon a few of these factors. Of course, they are not all. So the first one is that the complexity is three-dimensional, industry-specific, process-specific technology touching all the processes in the organization, and then you have to make it industry specific, and you have to keep up with the fast changing pace of technology. The IT as a management function is nascent. All your manufacturing, HR, finance have been like at least 200-year-old functions, whereas IT is like about 40, 50 years old, changing very fast. And of that, what we call as the digital or the consumerization of technology, just about maybe 10, 15 years old. There's an asymmetry of talent here. Less than 10% of the talent is on the enterprise side or the buying side, and more than 90% of the talent is on the sell side or the supply side, whether it's technology products companies or or the technology services companies. So, and this is one of the things we want to touch upon, in our chat today with Vijay, who has cracked this part of the equation. And then the incremental margins in technology, especially products, is almost as I as one of the technology sellers told me, it's infinite incremental margins. The incremental cost of sales being near zero. So that that means a lot of sales and marketing efforts out there, which may be which may confuse the buyers, and then buyers being in a you know uh, there's a asymmetry of talent on the buy side, and therefore the purpose of the ClarITea Chat, learning from the 17% club. So managing IT is an art because the science is not fully documented. You can't learn art by reading books. So you have to go to the gurus. So we have to learn this from CIOs who are on the 17% side, and this has to be done through not orchestrated discussions but very candid discussions on IT management teams. So here we are with informal chats on real questions in IT management and careers, answered by accomplished CIOs over a cup of tea. So once again, welcome Vijay sir, and thank you everyone joining there. Uh, Yogesh, Kamlesh, Subarao sir, and everybody. So let me start by taking the same topic ahead. So Vijay sir, as you reflect on this dismal rate of IT success, let's start with your life story, um, and calling out some key incidents or inflection points in your career, which you can say they set you up for success. What are those incidents or inflection points?
Okay. First of all, thanks, Jagdish, for inviting me. And good afternoon, everyone, all the listeners who have tuned in. And I can see a lot of messages out here. Actually, while you say that I'm in the 17%, reality is I'm also one of those guys who was not an IT person. I'm a mechanical engineer, did an MBA, did a post-graduation in production engineering, and then a few more courses and things like that. was not an IT career. So I started as a management consultant with TCS. And some of the learnings that I had over there, which really helped me. So one of the first ones was I think I was few days old in the organization and I was talking to one of the senior guys. And he said, यार मैं देखो तुम्हें बताता हूँ. He said in that typical Hindi. He said, अभी तुम बच्चे हो. अगर तुमने करना है ना तो एक चीज याद रखना, या तो नौकरी करना या नखरे करना. So which means that you can't have ego. And I think as you progress in life, that really helps you a lot, because then you know that you are not really you're grounded. Humility comes in a big way. That was one big lesson that I had in my life. So as I progressed, so I learned a lot of business knowledge. Being a management consultant, I worked on marketing strategy, supply chain, few other areas. So I got a good ringside view of the entire business. So that really helped me a lot, that you can understand business not from an IT perspective, not from a programming perspective or networking perspective, but from a business perspective as to what business value, what these guys really want. And then I moved on to Renbaxi. So over there in the business solutions, and I was working on a business process re-engineering project where we are looking at the supply chain, and then went into an SAP implementation. So over there, one of the key learnings, and which again really helps you, is how do you manage large scale projects? How do you manage complex teams? And how do you manage teams which are across geographies? As I moved in Renbaxi, so there's a point in time when I was handling IT in so many countries, more than 40 odd countries globally. So when you have a very diverse kind of people around, business people, so how do you really manage that? That was a big learning. Another thing from IT perspective, which I learned, was that since IT is a field that changes very fast, we need to constantly upgrade ourselves. So though I had some bit of educational background in terms of MBA, MTech, and all those kind of things, but I constantly did lot other courses. So I did maybe around 15, 20 or maybe more diplomas and certifications in various areas related to IT and business. So which really meant that I was keeping myself abreast with the entire thing. Another thing was, since I came from a consulting background initially, so I could understand both these sides of the table. So this side and that side. That really helped a lot as to how you gain a confidence with all the partners. So you need to, one thing to my mind, if I was to just sum up 2-3 things for the viewers as to what will help you in going to that so-called 17% club, which Jagdish said. I think number one, you need to partner with business a lot. You can't be sitting in isolation. And for that, you need to have a good business understanding. And you can't be just running around with your own high egos that just because you are from a technology function and others are not. So if you really leave that thing aside and constantly upgrade your own skills also, because especially in today's time with AI, ML, and so many other things coming in, you can't be really working on something which is so many years or so many days old. So you need to keep that in mind at all times and have a good partnership with the business. The last piece would be, at the end, it's not about IT investments. Remember this. We may say that we are doing all the IT projects, but it is about business value. What business value can you generate out of any IT investment? So I remember way back, we were among the first companies in India to start creating an IT annual report. So where it was a, I think 32 or 30 pages document as to what value does IT bring to the table from the investments that you make. So moment you get into that kind of things, you suddenly come to the 17%.
Yeah. No, that's really insightful, Vijay, because I know you to be a humble person, and I didn't know that this comes from way back in the past when somebody said told you that be humble. So that's really taking it to heart actually. Yeah. So I think as I mentioned also that this is the art you have to learn from the artists, and of course I have had mentors from everywhere. I've had mentors from the partner side. I've had mentors from the advisory and expert services, and you need to seek them out and to develop yourself, because as I said, there's not too much of it available scientifically. So tell me, sir, some of your, maybe a couple of incidents from your mentors, which really set you up for the success that you got.
So one is, I remember one incident way back, I think maybe late 90s, 99, 2000, around that time. So where many companies were not using video conferencing. Okay. And I remember our then CFO and then CEO who had to go for a trip to US or some such place, and maybe business class, first class, that kind of visit. So, and due to certain reasons, they could not go. And then one point came that can we do that same meeting sitting out here? And then we were discussing as to whether video conference really makes sense. So that's where the ROI figure. So CFO in 5 minutes said that my cost of staying over there, my boss's cost of staying over there, this is less than the cost of your VC equipment. Why don't you install it next week? Similarly, we were at that time implementing SAP, and we were just discussing as to what would be the ROI. So his response was really something which changed my own thinking. He says, do you think when the country builds roads, they think of ROI or they think for future? They think of future. He said, don't talk to me on ROI. You may be thinking from your perspective as an IT person that I have to give ROI on SAP implementation. I'm thinking it as a road which will take my company to a very different level. So moment you really, those are the kind of insights that change. And when I also remember this particular day, and I remember that date also, so in September 2007, 20th of those. So the day I joined Hero, so I met Mr. B.M. Munjal for the first time in my life at that time. And he said, very simple, he said, if you treat everyone as part of your family, they'll treat you as part of your family. So I think those are the kind of mentor things which really get embedded in your life and that change your own thinking at all times.
That's a powerful one. Treat everybody as part of the family. That so much connects with the Indian ethos of Vasudha Kutumbakam, and bringing
Absolutely.
that into management is like can be such powerful. And I know that kind of leads us very well into the next question, Vijay sir, is about you have cracked the code on fully exploiting the vendor capabilities. Okay, tell us some of your approaches in leveraging your vendors. I'm deliberately mentioning that term because I know you hate that word. So
There's no vendor.
why
There's
you
no
hate
vendor. I genuinely believe that there's no vendor. All are partners. They are partners in your success and even in your failures. They are partners in your happiness, in your sadness, everything. So there's no concept of vendors. The moment you actually make that switch in your own heart and mind that there's nothing called a vendor. Because why I say that is, at least I have not seen, let's talk of IT. IT as vendors. Vendors could be hardware, software, consulting, ABC, XYZ, whatever you may be. You tell me one IT company, one IT manager, one IT CIO who can succeed without them.
No
If you
one.
can't succeed without them, that means what are they? They are your extended team. Only difference is their salary is coming from somebody else organization, though paid via you. So why don't you really treat them as your extended arm, as your partners, as your really those guys who can take your own IT to a different level and treat them as trustworthy guys. So the moment you start thinking from that perspective, your equation with them changes. So you have a conversation, discussions with them which are more strategic rather than getting into haggling that please reduce it by 2 rupees, reduce it at 5 paisa, 2 paisa, whatever, 1%, whatever it may be. Then the entire equation changes. The moment that equation changes, the long-term thing comes. And for that, the 2 or 3 things if I was to look at. One is you need to have empathy. You need to really put yourself in their shoes, because a lot of times people say that there's a quarter end, there's a month end, kahan tak jayega, aayega na mere paas, apne aap kam karega. So I think that entire thing is conceptually wrong, because at the end of the day all of us are in business, but we also need to have empathy. And when we treat them with that respect, most of the people may or may not treat them respect, let me not comment on that, but if we treat them with respect, they'll treat you back with respect, number one. And also the amount of, maybe you get even better deals than anybody else without even getting into hard negotiations. That's one. And then what the point that you rightly said, Jagdish, I really like that point where you said that there's a huge amount of talent which is there in that field, and there's less talent. I don't remember the percentage that you spoke about, but there's a less talent in the IT corporates and a huge talent in that. So why can't we really take that talent and learn from them? Why can't our teams learn from them? So rather than just giving them orders, ki ye kar do, wo kar do, and all those things, why can't we really learn from them? And the moment you do that, again, that equation, entire thing changes. And one thing that I used to do was, while we learned a lot from them, I also went to them. So I know I have addressed these sales conferences of Airtels of this world, IBMs of this world, Pros, Infosys, a lot of them. I used to go over there, talk to, formally be part of their teams and spend time with them over there so that we can also share our own experiences, learnings, what we feel, how we buy, our own mindset. So then even the quality of proposals and the solutions that came from them really improved a lot.
Yeah, in fact, that also reminds me, I having been part of, I think, maybe a Microsoft, sales conference on, basically just a freewheeling discussion on what do CIOs look for, when they are buying stuff.
You're right, absolutely.
I think those discussions, then, breaking those boundaries and then, not having that we versus they kind of feeling. I think that's
Correct.
very important in building partnerships.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think you touched on something which is very, very close to my heart, and I kind of write sometimes about it, is empathy. The moment you have empathy, a lot of boundaries get broken.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but I think that's such a, I would say, I identified one of the issues, which is the asymmetry of talent, and that's such a beautiful way to, leverage that for your advantage rather than cribbing about it, or rather than, sort of feeling limited about it.
Correct.
I would say that's a great insight, Vijay, personally for me. Now, the next question I would ask you about, Vijay, is, which a lot of us professionals grapple with. And, I've seen this with CIOs itself, that, they think that we think that we can do much more, but then, we get mired in all this complexity of what we have to manage in IT. And then, we feel limited. So you kept expanding your role, from CIO. You took over another role as CHRO. First, I thought that you're leaving that role and becoming a CHRO. Then I said, then I realized no, it is CIO plus CHRO. And then you also took on an additional function of Chief Sustainability Officer. So I think this is like what I call as scaling up yourself. I think doing a work of three executives, that too at a very senior level, is not fun. I'm sure there's a lot of learning for all of us, that you can provide as to how do you scale yourself up, and fundamentally it is about how do you contribute more to the organization. So tell us some practical insights, some hacks that you did, to do justice to all these three roles.
Okay, so before I answer, I finish my tea. Why don't you also finish your tea? Thandi ho jayegi.
Just about on the last sip.
Yeah, finished. Okay. Now, see, before that, let me put a disclaimer on this entire thing. I must admit, I am never too good on work-life balance. So let's keep that. So it's not that. I'll put that caveat right up front. So whatever I say would be based on whatever I have done rather than a gyan part of it. So I think one of the key things over here is to succeed in any function, and whether it's one function, two functions, three functions, as I was doing. One of the key things that you need to do is have a very good process orientation. If things are going in an ad hoc fashion, you will not be able to succeed. So maybe my own background with TCS initially, where there's a huge focus on both process and documentation. Huge focus that was given over there. That really helped me in putting processes to everything. The second, see, again, you have to remember that whether it is IT, HR, CSR, or finance, or any other function that you might handle, You are not God. You can't handle everything on your own. You have to have a team which is competent, team which is capable, which is motivated to do that. So you need to focus on team a lot in terms of enhancing their competence, enhancing their motivation, and also delegation. So a lot of people don't delegate actually, and that's what really ensures that those guys have a lot of work. So I remember what I used to do was, and it's a formal thing, anyone can go and check at any time. So at the beginning of each year, sign a couple of papers digitally or whatever, where that these are the areas which have been delegated, right up to the help desk guy or this guy or this guy. And this is the doer, this is a checker, this is a prover. And only I think if out of the entire list, not more than 2% would come to me or even less than that. So which would mean that you have to have effective delegation, but with good checks and balances. So there was huge amount of audits, internal, external. So you can, and you have your own checks and balances. So you need to have that control, but along with that, delegation is there. So with the team, for example, in IT team, I think there was huge focus on even areas like business simulations. So while in most of the companies, IT guys will not work on business simulation trainings and like that, but to enhance their competence levels, there's a lot of things which are done. Because again, if the team is motivated, another thing which I have always done is use automation a lot. I don't know whether you know this, but many people, and I can see some of the names over here, they know that I hardly ever use a pen. I don't do that. So, and I don't think I've signed very many papers for last many years. So everything was digitally signed, totally
I'm
paperless.
taking
Yeah.
notes, sir. I'm
So
taking notes.
so sure. Thanks. Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Oh, no. But that's a very important point. That's a very
So
important point.
the key thing over there was huge focus on automation, digital signatures. So even a purchase order to be released would be released from my phone only, and you don't have to sign anything. Automatically, it gets a PDF gets generated. It is sent to whoever has to be sent to. So the moment you start using extensive use of technology, your dependence on an individual goes. So if I go to CSR, every day's work would be put in folders on the shared folder. The moment you put in over there, so if somebody is not there, I'm not there, someone can just go and see as to what is done, not done, and all that. So that life becomes very easy if you have automation. If you have a team which is motivated, which is competent, you have a huge amount of process related. And of course, the last piece is you have to put in a lot of efforts. 12, 14 hours a day, whatever you have to put in, you have to put in all those efforts. So you can't be saying that you ask others to work and you say that I'm relaxing. So there has to be work. So these are some of the things which I did, but I guess that's how I succeeded.
But let me ask you an associated question here, Vijay, which is, which kind of underlies some of this, you know, delegation part, which is trust. And I do see, a problem a lot of times, especially with leaders, who are either micromanagers or who fail to delegate, okay, or like who fail to collaborate. I think in all these three things, a very important underlying connection is the trust. So how do you how do you build trust? And how would you, let's say, if you had a team member, okay, who had that kind of a tendency of lacking trust, what are the kind of things you would work on him to for him to develop trust and therefore be able to do these things?
See, one thing is very clear. Not all individuals are same. So there'll be a lot of people who had that. I wouldn't say just few. So you have to go to the basic management principle, SDDB. I don't know whether you know this or not. You know the SDDB? Yeah, Jagdish. Sam Dam
Maybe.
Dand.
Oh, acha, that I know.
So you have to first ensure that you make that guy understand. Yeah, this is why this is important for him or her to really work as a team member, work as those kind of things. And then, of course, so it's primarily about change management, because one of the key roles over here is of the leader is also about change management. And change management doesn't, so a lot of IT people think that I have to focus on change management because I have to change the users, they are not using the system. But reality is your change management actually begins within IT,
Correct. Correct.
within your own. First with yourself and then with your team.
Absolutely.
And once you start doing that, and once you start doing that, showing to them that what you say you mean that, that's where the trust builds. It's a slow process. I won't say that it's a very fast process. It's not a switch on, switch off thing. But over a period of time, most of the people change. Maybe there could be one off who may not change, but then you have to live with those guys. I won't claim that 100% change. You have to live with those kind of guys.
No, absolutely. And I think, important thing is that if, trust begets trust. So you trust people and then, they start developing that trust. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So there was a related question from audience. Let me take it here. Um, so there is one question here from Kamlesh, which is about business and technology alignment is important, but how can we make it seamless collaboration? There is always conflict. So how do you resolve it?
I think this conflict is why. Why is the conflict? Conflict is because if the project succeeds, who gets the credit? If the project fails, who gets the blame? That's the only conflict, nothing else. If you really
Correct.
boil down the entire thing onto one single line. Now, if you are collaborating and you say that whether it is success or failure, it's a joint thing. Because at the end of the day, whether it is IT or say a finance or HR, they are not spending their own money, it's company's money. And they're not doing it for themselves, they're doing it for the company. The company's objectives are paramount. So moment it becomes a joint thing, your conflicts start melting. So that's all you have to do. But if you say, no, it's an IT project, SAP was done and we did wonderful. No, it was done jointly. If there were no users, you would not have been. Similarly, users can't say that they did it. Without IT, they would not have been able to do it.
I think that's an important one. So I can contribute there to that question. Um, but I mean, first thing I must say that you captured it so so beautifully. It's all a question of credit versus blame, right? Who gets the credit and who gets the blame? So I saw that problem, when I sort of took over as Tata Motors CIO. And one of the first things I started telling my team that, whenever we are presenting to any business leaders, okay, please get a photo of the guy who helped you within that function, okay, and put it out there on the slide. You don't have to talk about it, okay. And you say that, listen, this project wouldn't have been successful without him or her.
Absolutely. Great.
And the moment you do that, in front of leaders, suddenly those boundaries melt away, and that whole credit versus blame thing, like, it becomes like, then people want to help you because you will be putting their photo on your presentation.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is another question from Jayashri Nair. She says, why is the failure rate being accepted as inevitable? Um,
I think,
so,
Jason,
yeah, please, sir, please go ahead.
I don't think we should accept this as inevitable. Number one. Number two, we have to define failure. What is failure? So when say Jagdish said 83% projects fail or IT does not, what does it really mean? That it does not deliver to the expectations which it was supposed to deliver. So if you say that this project has failed, it doesn't. Most of the cases, it will not be that you have to redo the entire implementation or anything. Maybe in 1 to 5% you might have to do. But failure is that when you started that this will be my ROI or this will be my value from the entire project. If you are not able to meet the value, that is where you have to. You say it's not failure. Now coming to inevitable part, I think it depends on the leader. If you think that you are taking it as inevitable, you will be taking a lot of failures. There will be failures irrespective of, even in the 17% club and 83% club, there will be a lot of failures. How you learn from them, how you ensure that you really next time don't fail. That is the biggest thing which will lead to your success next time. That's what differentiates between that 83% and 17%, how I see. You have to learn. If you fail fast, fail cheap, but learn. Don't repeat the same mistake again and move on. And do it much better next time.
No, absolutely. I think I fully agree with you, Vijay sir. In fact, I learned a process which is actually from the product development people, and we brought it very quickly into the IT. And this was a concept called the TGR TGW. Now, it may sound very fancy, TGR TGW. It's actually very simple. Things gone right and things gone wrong. So, every time you finish a project, whether success or failure, if the team regroups and starts reflecting, okay, what
Correct.
what went right, what went wrong, and then basically starts imbibing those learnings into the next project, slowly you will find that um, that inevitability of failure starts reducing. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So,
That's a good point.
absolutely. So, sir, now I have it's so nice to see Kapil Paliwal here, and I hope you remember him. He was
Yeah,
part
yeah,
of.
yeah. Great to hear from AutoDX.
Yes, 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 yes. He's
Hi,
moved
Kapil.
on. Yeah, yeah. So this is something I mentioned in today's post also, that there can't be a more stark meeting where I think the CIO of Hero Honda sitting in the office of Bajaj Auto in Pune, and we kind of we sort of realized and and called out the irony of that, the Bajaj and Hero, and both were competing for adoption of AutoDX, and we used to measure those numbers, who's doing better, Bajaj or Hero. I think there's a very important point here, which is about collaborating with competitors and with the industry. Now, I want to sort of point out here that you were chairman of the SIAM, IT committee, and you drove a lot of collaboration. So we and we generally get sort of mired into the within the organization complexity, and here you, I, and Rajiv and all of us were trying to do something which was for the industry. It took a lot of time, but then I think we did a few things well. So I want to hear from you. Like, what was the philosophy? Because I know it was an old project. It started somewhere in the 90s, and and what are, like, some of the takeaways, or let me put it this way: what are some of the insights you want to leave with the viewers, as in terms of how to expand your perspective and collaborate with the other industry players and your competitors. Of course, the first thing I still remember, you said the first thing in the show, which was keep your ego aside. But beyond that, what are the lessons?
Yeah. I think for those who may not know AutoDX was the first ever industry-wide collaboration project in the country of any industry. So where we first set up IT standards for data exchange and then set up a system, which was a cloud-based system, which was there. So as Jagdish you rightly said, it started somewhere in 90s. But I remember around 2010 or 2009 or 10 when I took over as the SIAM chairman. So I met Srinivasan, and we were discussing this, and he said that there were a couple of earlier attempts and this project failed. So we analyzed as to what are the real issues as to why the project failed. The two things which came out very clearly. One was, of course, the technology. Three things. One was technology not mature. The second one was that all the people were not coming onto the table together. And third one was that the process was not agreed. And it involved huge amount of change management. I'll use that word. So we are bringing all the competitors and potential giants and everyone onto one table, making all of them agree to do something. And key thing over there was to remove the fear that if Hero is doing something, Bajaj will not be able to see that data, or vice versa. Because moment that thing came up, and we ensured that the data, it's about processes, it's about the entire industry gaining out of it, and at the end of the day, customer gaining out of it. Because if your entire transaction process cost boils down to 70 paise, that was the cost at that time per transaction, the entire cost of IT really comes down. And Jagdish, you remember we had done so many ROI computations. And then as we did this, I remember 4th of February 2014 when we went live on the Auto Expo, one day prior to Auto Expo, when we did that press conference in Delhi only. And after that, it really worked well. Now, then there was this phase where we were just discussing that, okay, AutoDX is there. We have taken some 13, 14 odd transactions, how to take it to a different level and how to now really incorporate new technologies into this. That was the discussion that we had at Bajaj Auto plant. I was there, I was leading that discussion on that day. So I remember on the board, we were discussing as to these new technologies are coming. At that time, we were talking of cloud, we were talking of IoT, RPA, those kind of technologies. And how can we adopt, create a digital road transformation roadmap for the Indian auto industry? So that was the starting point. And then we did that project over the next 1-2 years and created a booklet which was on the digital transformation roadmap for Indian auto industry. It was, I think, again, the first time that for an entire industry, a digital transformation roadmap now. But the key point over here was collaboration among the competitors, because it was about knowledge sharing. And why I personally think that it helps is that you can tell as to what the best practices are and how. One thing that we need to keep in mind is that whenever you implement any software, say SAP, so we are using SAP, Bajaj Auto was using SAP, the various other companies using SAP. But your competitive advantage doesn't come from in the implementation of a software. So there'll be so many organizations. So that's where if that thing goes away from your mind, then you'll collaborate with them. Your competitive advantage comes how well or how different are you using and how what are you doing with that software? What kind of analytics, what kind of processes you have done. So the competitive advantage comes from usage of the software and not the software as such. And that's where then you can actually work with your competitors also. And this word is not about competition, it's about co-option. That's how I see it.
Absolutely. And I think I saw those meetings that you chaired. I think an important part again is like, to be empathetic and listen to everybody's concerns. I know there used to be questions which were like, sometimes somebody didn't attend the last meeting, so there'll be a question in the next meeting which has already been addressed. But what I really saw, and I learned from you actually, is how to be very patient. And sometimes the patience helps people feel respected, and builds that trust which is necessary to take this kind of an initiative forward.
Absolutely.
So I have run out of my questions, and I kept them short because I knew there will be a lot of questions from the audience. So let me start from the top. Anil Gupta. Hey, thanks for attending, Anil. Then Mr. Subbarao, Ambuj, Kamlesh, Yogesh. Thank you, Surya, Ashish. Jayashri, we answered your question. Manish. Hey, Amrinder, good to see you here. Uh, you should be hosting the show, man.
Yes,
Naresh.
absolutely.
And Sanjay, I believe Sanjay is an old colleague, Sanjay Sharma. Saurabh Pandit. I'm just looking for questions here. Kapil, Ramaswamy Subbiya, Ram Nivas. Ram Nivas is an old colleague from GE. Hey, Mayor, yaar, thanks for.
Mehriyar had a question, if I remember. Mehriyar had a question somewhere.
Yeah. Mehriyar has a questions. I'm coming to that. I'm just like following a rule, looking for questions amongst the highs and hellos. So, Vijay, how is human relations and technology forming close link to success? I think very, very important question.
Absolutely, Mehriyar, you're right. At the end of the day, organizations are made of human beings. And these are the human beings who run technology. So if both of them really work together, you can have a force multiplier. So the productivity of individuals goes up, and also the quality of technology implementation goes up. And finally, the organization really gains a lot out of it. So when HR and IT work together, it doesn't impact only a particular function or area, it impacts the entire organization and all the stakeholders. And that's where it really helps a lot.
Yes, sir. Are you done, sir?
Yep.
Okay. So next, I was actually looking for Diwakar, Mohit Harbola, old colleague, It's an absolute delight to see the two giants of Indian automotive IT on the same platform. So, morning Mohit had sent me, a couple of questions for you, Vijay
Okay.
sir, on that. So I was just looking for it in my mobile. So he said that I would like to hear from both of you, Mistros, on how do you see the future of auto retail evolving? Like Mercedes-Benz India, do you see dealers getting sidelined and the OEMs taking charge of direct customer engagements and the overall sales customer experience? He's not done. He says most OEMs are working on an end-to-end online sales journey. Maruti claims to have solved 24 or 26 steps in the customer buying journey by digitizing these touch points. What does it mean for the future of automotive retail?
Yeah, I read that of 24 out of 26, and I
Yeah,
do
yeah,
speak to Rajesh a couple of times, and he does share that there's huge amount of work that he and his team are doing. So I personally, I could have a very different opinion on this one. I go back to the base thing that the dealers are nothing but your extended arm. They are your partners. So they can't go away, and they should not go away both ways. You can't
correct.
really do away with them, and you should not do away with them. There's a huge amount of, I'll say, value that these dealers bring in. It's not just from a sales perspective, but customer service perspective, your brand advocacy perspective, and ensuring that the products that are there on the road for you really do very well. What most of the auto companies today are doing by digitizing the entire end-to-end process is not trying to eliminate the dealers, but trying to work closely with dealers to ensure that the customer really gains in this entire journey. And we have seen last 1.5 years where customers want to do a lot of stuff electronically. So how can both an OEM and a dealer really facilitate the entire thing for the benefit of customer? That's how I see. So to my mind, it's not about doing away with the dealers. At least I don't believe in that.
Yeah, I also agree with you. Since the question was to both of us, let me add my 2 cents to it. See, we have to look at the entire life cycle. The sale is just one part of it. There's this entire life cycle. Whether you buy a bike or a car or a truck. I think it has got life cycle of a few years, and the dealers engage in the entire life cycle. You have to renew your insurance every year. You have to get serviced, your vehicle serviced with genuine parts and all. So there's a lot more value they create in the entire ecosystem. And as you rightly said, we need to treat them as partners. And I don't think that the intent is to sideline them. The intent is to serve the customer better and remove a lot of non-value adding activities from the entire process. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
It's about
again,
giving a better customer experience.
absolutely, absolutely. So again, acknowledging some more of our viewers, Divakar, Mohit, we answered your question. Kamlesh, we answered your question. Ravindra, Shipra, good to see you here. Sumit, Mukbil, treat employees as family. There was a long one, from Girish Singh Bhandari, I think, which was a cue to us when Vinay brought it on. He says that agri vendors need to be treated as partners, but they need to have some decision making powers as well as partners or strategic partners, which is ideally not the case. So yeah, so how do you? So the question probably is, how do you empower your vendors and how do you basically share some of your decision making with them?
So I think the key thing is for your own IT, you are accountable and responsible. If you are accountable, you can't really delegate the decision making. You can always get their insights, inputs, but you can't then tomorrow say that I did this because some vendor told me to do this. So decision making can't be delegated. Accountability is yours. It can't be anybody else's. What you can do is to empower them, to give them that information, that they give you all possible insights, inputs to give a better decision, a non-biased or unbiased decision. But decision has to be yours. I personally don't think you should delegate the decision making to partners. Then you're abdicating your job.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, one of the things I used to do was to challenge my partners to give me ideas. So they may not give you the, you may not give them the decision making, but you
Yes.
must challenge them to bring you the best of ideas. Like, I remember long back, when I signed up the database advanced services from the OEM. At that time, I challenged those guys. The first meeting, I challenged those guys. I said, listen, you guys have seen and managed the best of the databases. So I want you to take um, my database management processes and practices, okay, to the best that you have seen. How much time will you take? And they said, so we'll do it in 6 months. I said, I know the state of my databases. You can't do it in 6 months. Take a year, but 1 year down the line, I'll hold you accountable to that. So just remember that question. I mean that incident. Yeah. So I think Girish that satisfies. Saurabh asks, empathy is important, but how have you evaluated team versus partners on capability, intent, and perseverance? I think it's more about, if I understand correctly, it's about the partner selection process.
I think when you talk about capability intent, sort of one thing, again, one has to keep in mind, as I said about the team, you can't really have all partners saying that they are competent. So you have to do your evaluation. And there are times when you have to drop the partners. Just because you are calling them partner doesn't mean that you will never actually do away with them. If someone is not performing well, then in the spirit of partnership, also drop that person. So there are a lot of times when we gave somebody an order and then decided that next time this person is not really getting an order because maybe the quality of service was bad or quality of competence coming from the person was bad or whatever it may be. The partnership doesn't mean that you continue to live with that.
Correct.
So that's where
Yeah,
intent and everything comes in play.
I mean, the empathy can play a role to the extent that, you may give them a little bit of a longer rope. You may give them very specific actions for improvement before you fire them, but end of the day, you have to hold them accountable. Right.
Correct.
So next question, Vijay sir, is from Pawan. You can see it on the screen. It says,
Yeah.
partners, extended IT technology companies are more knowledgeable. They may drive you and create dependency. How do you build internal team to manage partner efficiently?
I think that's very, very important, Pawan. You need to really, I always used to say at the start of any project, in front of the consultants themselves to my team, that you have to take over from these guys because they can't run your entire system for life. So that's where you have to also enhance the competence of your own team. That's where I said in the beginning that you have to learn from the partners. You cannot really be always dependent on them. So where you need to focus on giving more inputs, insights into your own team, build the capabilities of your team with a very specific purpose that the consultants who are coming in, the partners who are coming in are there for a specific period and telling transparently partners also because even they then move on to the next level, providing even better value to you on some other project.
No, absolutely. In fact, here, um, when I had taken over, I had a very over dependence on partners. In fact, my own people used to get really flooded, with so many, I would say, decision making from these partners. Then, so one of the consultants told me a very simple thing. He said that, listen, you need to have a strategy of two in a box. What the two in a box means that, if you have a data center team from your partners, then you need to map somebody to the data center head. In terms of your own side, you need to have a data center head, so that the decision making is very I would say targeted. So we actually built the team like that. We found that which are the major areas where there's a practice or a delivery manager coming from the partner. We need to have somebody inside who maps to that, and that's how we build the team. So two in a box
Good concept.
I took away that concept with me. So you have a compliment from Sanjay Sharma. Never saw paper on your table ever, sir. Then we move on to other questions. Um, how long you tolerated a team member who's reluctant to change or upgrade?
I'll say I was lucky enough, most of the guys changed.
Okay, that's a short and sweet answer. So yeah, question coming from Mukbil: how much of an innovator can a CIO be? We know a number of technology projects, particularly experimentation with new technology, fail. Is the risk quotient worth taking?
Mukul, I think that's a great question. And A very short answer would be yes, this risk quotient is worth taking. And I did that for many, many years where I would have an experimentation budget, tell these guys to do anything and everything, come up with, and of course, within a particular boundary limits, and both budget and the scope and all those things. And some of these projects actually, even if out of 10 projects, 6 of them failed, through 3 didn't show that promise that we wanted them. But even one single project would give me returns which were maybe 100 times the cost that I would spend on these 10 projects. So I genuinely believe that you have to be innovator, otherwise you'll be so if I conceptually go, so there's a run, there's a grow, and there's a transform IT. Run is about keeping the lights on. If you don't innovate, you'll be just keeping the lights on, ensuring that your servers are up, network is up, users are happy, email is working, and that's all. But if you have to transform the organization, you have to be innovator, and you have to spend money, and you have to also encourage your team to be innovative and be ready to accept failures.
No, absolutely. And this is also sometimes you can look at it from a portfolio point of view. That when you invest, you build a portfolio of, let's say, 10 stocks. 3 of them fail. 3 of them deliver 10% returns. But those 3 or 4 of them that deliver like multi-bagger returns, they are the ones who make money for you. So yeah, you can't put your bets only on one innovation.
And you never know in the beginning as to which will be those 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's and there's another thing, which with all this digital transformation, a concept that's coming and that's being accepted is the fail fast. That you take some small bets and you fail fast as long as it doesn't sink the company. People are okay with the failure. So Vijay sir, next question: are CIOs of late focusing more on industry buzzwords and are just trying to keep up with their peer group? Good question. Peer pressure.
Vivek, so right. So I think it boils down to first basic thing that when you implement anything, are you implementing for the company or are you implementing for your peers or for some conferences or for some awards or for some magazines as it used to be earlier? Similarly, are you using these buzzwords to kind of tell people as to what these things are and trying to impress rather than so moment you get into that, you can't really play that game for long. I can tell you can't play that for long. Because having just a superficial knowledge of many of these words doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help the organization and doesn't help the peers at all. And what I have seen, and you are right to that extent, that a lot of people who use these buzzwords today only have superficial knowledge. You ask them 2 more questions about blockchain or about what dark is all about or any such things, and then you can see them seeing here and there, and they won't know that. So, but for the first 2 minutes, they'll impress you like anything. So I think you need to be very clear that you are doing it to give value back to business and not to impress others.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I think it's also like, are you in for a 100-meter run or are you in for a marathon? If you're in for a marathon, then you have to do away with these, short fixes. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Another question coming from Ram Nivas Kushwaha. Sometimes IT is keen to utilize the practices or application, but business functions users running away. So it's like you have brought the camel to the water, but he doesn't want to drink. How do you solve that?
It goes back to the same point. When you did that, did you partner them right up front? Did you even ask them whether they need it, or just because you thought that an RPA is a good technology, so let me just go and implement RPA? Just because I think that I have to do an IoT project because it looks very nice on my team CV. I did an IoT and then these guys never used it. Did I look at the culture of the organization that yes, I'm going ahead with a huge analytics project, but the culture is that people would say that, okay, please bring in 2 photocopies of the entire report and I'll see only on paper or only on Excel. Please download the report. So moment you just look in only in isolation, these things would happen. But if you are partnering with the business right up front, then this situation will never arise. Maybe you'll never do that project because you feel that this project is not required. And if you do it, it will be a great success. Either way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a long question from Ashish. He says, you're aware that some organizations have excellent legacy systems which serve the business so well and gave competitive advantage. How did you see COTS products providing same value? We have seen some real challenges when organizations move from legacy, excellent working systems to COTS products and struggled for a long time to achieve usage. I think it's a good insider question, I should say.
Absolutely. You want to answer? This is Jagdish, or should I give my views?
Please, sir, you start. You go first, and then I'll contribute my bit.
See, I think what Ashish you are saying is yes, there are legacy systems and which are doing a good service to the organization, but that should not prevent you from upgrading, because advantage of COTS or the new versions of, say for example, if you are on a particular version of Oracle or SAP or any such software, the newer versions would also bring in a lot of best practices. Lot of things which are required in today's industry or maybe in tomorrow's industry from a customer perspective or from the organization perspective. If you continue to live with legacy, while you will not go through that short-term pain. Short-term could be 6 months, could be 1 year. Short-term doesn't mean a 1 day or 2 day. Or I know that a lot of companies do struggle for 6 months, 8 months to put in a new system. But life of an organization is way beyond those 6 8 months. To my mind, you should go in for many of these because they really help a lot. They really help. If you today work on a system which is a COBOL, I'm just taking an example, maybe it's serving you well, but it won't have those functionalities which your customers of today or tomorrow want. So that's where you need to really ensure that you constantly upgrade. Each upgrade would be a pain, but it's pain worth going. That's how I believe.
Yeah. So I think just to contribute my 2 cents to it, I think we have to look at organization as what they call as an entity in perpetuity, and therefore you can't take any initiatives, especially in technology, which have a limited life. So the moment so Ashish, I know where your question is coming from. So let me give a simple counter. In 1995, the systems that you were managing, would they have run even in 2021? So that's a question, right? And would they have not created a bigger technical debt for you? So technical debt is a big question, which basically decelerates your efforts in digital transformation. So you have to take a conscious call. Yes, sometimes these are pains. These are a pain because they bind you to a certain, I would say, architectural constraints, which are again learned from what you may call as best practices. You may like or not like it, but just the fact that there's a big organization out there who's going to back it up, which is itself going to exist in perpetuity, and therefore is you're going to use a product which you can assure yourself that is going to work in perpetuity for the organization. Of course, you have to keep upgrading. I think that's doing justice with your decisions instead of having personal preferences. I mean, I can say, and Mr. Sethi, I know you and I had a discussion on the sidelines of that, and I think that was one of the first discussions we had. It was about this only that we chose Siebel for
Yeah.
CRM way back in 2003, and a few years later, you also we had a discussion, and I think one of the things I told you is that this is we want to go for a product about which we don't have to think कि कल रहेगा कि नहीं रहेगा,
Correct.
it's going to be there tomorrow or not, right? And I can say that 2021, 18 years later, yeah, 2003 we went live.
Going strong.
18 years later, it's still 18 years, 3 or 4 upgrades later, it is still running and supporting 50,000 users. Yeah. So let me uh, take some more questions here, sir. I know we are just at the end of the hour. Let me see if there are further questions here. Thanks, Deepak, um, for the appreciation. Mr. Subbarao Hegde, culture to support experimentation is must. We need to create an experimentation mindset from CEO to lead engineers that embraces experiment and continuous learning that fuels the organization. Yeah,
True.
that's true. Yeah. So I think we have run out of questions, sir, and we are just at the end of the hour. So it was such an insightful one. I learned. So let me quickly 1 minute. Let me summarize some of my notes which I was taking. You know, have humility, learn all the time, learn business equally as much as you learn about technology. You must partner with business, take away that equation of blame versus credit, okay, and make it a joint success or joint blame. It's all about business value, okay, and your credibility comes out of when you show the business value. Yeah, treat everyone as a part of extended family, including your vendors. So vendors are not vendors; they are partners.
Partners.
Yeah. So you have to deal with them with empathy. You have to leverage the partner talent, and you also have to contribute in terms of enabling your partners. Yeah. Then I think good learnings on scaling up yourself, having a process orientation, building a competent, motivated team, delegating. I really like the fact that you could delegate 90% of what you are doing, and automation. Never handle a pen. Yeah, and I think I really like that insight about failure. This came in response to the question where how do you define failure? It is the mismatch with expectations. So it starts with the question. Do you set expectation realistically, or do you say that I'll have magic happen with IT? you know do you remember the good old days of ERP when we said all problems will get solved by ERP?
Yeah,
Okay.
it will cook my breakfast in the morning.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think important thing about failures is not to take them for granted, but to learn from them. And of course, like so many other insights. So and thank you everyone for great questions. I was just doing the timing. I think we had our discussion for about half an hour, and the rest of the half an hour was on questions. So that many questions we handled. Imran, I see your question. We're just at the end of it, so we'll answer in response to your comment on the post. But thank you, everyone, so much. I hope you liked this Chai Pe Charcha, and and it was useful. Thank you, Vijay sir, for spending your valuable hour with me and with all our audience, a very engaged audience. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jagdish. I think thank you for inviting me also, and thanks to all the participants. I'm seeing so many good comments, so thanks to each one of them who's writing all these nice words. Thank you very much, Jagdish. For me, it was a great learning session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks everyone, and look forward to our next session of ClarITea Chat. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.